All right, folks, I gave you a little bit to come in. Welcome back to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris, and I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. It is Wednesday, April 15th, and for 50 million Americans, it is coronavirus check day, right, Tim? And I can already tell you that, it depends on how you file, what your status is. There have been Americans who have already gotten the check, but by today is really the day that the first round is over. And we will spend a little bit of time talking about that on the show today because we got a lot of questions from people who receive Social Security, or in other situations, and we'll run through that real quick because of what today is. But for the most part, today's show is about running a voter analysis in Arizona. It's about the markets trying to shrug off what we knew to be bad corporate earnings and also bad economic data from retail sales. And also we'll talk about a bunch of other things, the news of the day with coronavirus and Barack Obama endorsing Joe Biden. But welcome back to the show, folks. Thanks for watching. If you are watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that little bell for your notification. Like this morning, today we tried to give you guys a little bit of time. But first, let's bring it to Tim to give us the market updates. We've had a good run the last couple of days, and last week was a great week. So to be expected today. Tim, why don't you take it away before we get into the endorsement and what it could mean?
So markets are down 2%, maybe a little bit more. The Dow's down 525 points. S&P down 2.4%. NASDAQ down 2%. NASDAQ was up 4% yesterday. Yes, retail sales came in very weak, down 8.7%. People were looking for down 8%. I really don't think that surprised anyone. 4 or 5 big banks reported earnings this morning. They all made comments about significantly increasing loan loss reserves. And that was very similar to what we saw with JP Morgan and Wells Fargo yesterday. And almost all of these banks are down 3 to 4 to 5%. I really think the market selling off today is as much a reaction to the fact that we've had a very strong move off the lows. Only 3 weeks ago, the Dow and S&P, NASDAQ have rallied between 24 and 29% in 3 weeks. That's just an astronomical rally in a very short period of time. And I think that markets have gone from being just extremely oversold to being probably a little bit overbought in the near term. And we're probably at a stage now where we need real hard visibility on how and when the timing is and the details for coming out of this economic lockdown and what the stages would be and what the timing would be of it. That being said, it's early in the day. We're 30 minutes into trading, and we're, hard to tell if we've seen the lows of the day yet, but we'll be watching over the next couple hours.
Let's look at retail sales a little bit before we run into discussing something in the other segment. If you look inside the retail sales report, and this goes to show you the interest level this morning, folks, on this number. For a while, the Census Bureau couldn't. They have their economic indicators page. That's where they release this report. For a while, you couldn't access that landing page. It was down for a while and kept giving a document error, which is, unless something's messed up with the server itself, it's a traffic error. So, we get it emailed. So I just clicked to the PDF and circumvented that landing page. So anyway, inside the report itself, that's why we call the show Inside the Numbers, right, Tim? Sporting goods, hobby, musical instruments, and bookstores down 23.3%. Motor vehicle and parts dealers down 25.6%. auto, and other motor vehicle dealers, a subcomponent of that, down 27.1%. Furniture and home furnishing, home furniture stores, down 26.8%. Tim and I were talking about online sales, and it's interesting. Online sales are up. Well, we'll get a better picture of online sales soon. But right now in this report, we have non-store retailers, and that's a gain of 3.1. Building materials and garden and supplying dealerships, dealers, that they saw a gain of 1.3%. Health and personal care, not surprising here, right? 4.3% gain. So and then general merchandise stores saw a 6.4% gain, Tim. So what we're seeing is what we would expect to see. Food industry is getting hammered. Extra goods, clothing and apparel getting hammered. Nobody's going to go out and buy a car right now. Motor vehicle dealerships are getting hammered. So,
Rich, when you say the food industry, I think you want to specifically designate
food service,
restaurant and food service,
yeah,
as opposed to the grocery business.
That's true,
which is just killing it.
Right. That's true. Actually, Tim, thank you for saying that and making that distinction. Food and beverage, which are retail grocery stores, Tim. Okay. Well, food and beverage, the grocery stores are a subcomponent of that. The overall category designated the code NAICS. For those who are really interested, the code is 445. 25.6% gain, Tim. Grocery stores in that subcomponent.
Yes.
26.9%. I mean, talk about killing it. Which goes to show you folks.
Now, is there a line item for how much of that is toilet paper?
I wish there was. I really do. I really wish there was. I don't know about everybody else, but in my local Publix, there is, and we have several of them in this city, but my local one, which is about 3 miles from my house, still does not have toilet paper. I keep getting lucky the time I'm going there, which I don't want to spit it out loud. I'll tell how many people from my city, if you know what I'm talking about, then you live here, and I'll give you a tip if you watch Inside the Numbers. Let me give you some more value for being a PPD subscriber and a viewer of Inside the Numbers. 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Publix on 13 and 39th. I just keep getting lucky. It has to do with my schedule, right? So I walk in there to get what we may need. And sure enough, the guy with the cart rolls out from behind where the warehouse is, and he's got maybe 2 boxes of Charmin or Cottonelle or whatever they're pushing that day. Yeah. It's never that much. It's only, a box probably carries 4 packages tops, and maybe they'll walk out there with 2 or 3 boxes. That's it. So if you live where I live, Tracy, if you're watching, I know some people who do. It's 2 to 3 o'clock, folks. Same thing with eggs, and I just keep getting lucky. There was an egg shortage. I waited to the last minute because we don't. We eat farm eggs, brown eggs. We don't eat regular, like the white eggs that people eat. So my wife was like, "You want to color eggs? You better go get those eggs. Don't you forget those eggs." And I'm not going to forget them. It was Friday, and I forgot. And I got, sure enough, I walk in there, and they stroll out with a bunch of cartons of eggs at 2 o'clock, which is perpendicular to where the toilet paper aisle is. So I just get so lucky. I mean, sometimes, it's Murphy's Law in my household, but often, when it comes to stuff like that, I just get lucky, but yeah, so it's not all bad news, Tim. And I think what this report tells us is that the consumer still has money in their pocket, right? The consumer sentiment index down in the 70s now, which that was to be expected, but I can't wait.
I think we lost Rich for a minute. So if I'm still on, I think it's worth mentioning when people are looking at these retail sales numbers, the economy was really only shut down for 2 full weeks in March. And even though you saw 20 to 25% declines in a lot of categories, it could be double that in April. I'm sure that some stuff maybe started to shut down in the second week in March, even before the CDC social distancing guidelines came out. There were some businesses that were starting to run split shifts. But in April, the shutdown has been more extensive, will have been more extensive for the month of April than it was in the month of March. And all the numbers that we're seeing for March, as bad as they are, will probably be not twice as bad, but maybe 25 to 50% worse in the month of April. Now, that being said, I just think that, look, investors understand that. And a lot of investors are really looking beyond first quarter earnings, even guidance from some companies for second quarter, and even a lot of the economic projections when people are talking about, well, Q2 GDP could be down 40%, unemployment could be as high as 20%. That's very much in the market. The big uncertainty in the market is how vibrant and how quick the snapback will be. I'm not really sure what's going on with Rich. He seems to have lost his signal. I saw one comment in the chat. Earlier that market down today. Is it all day traders? Look, I think it's a combination of people who have been swing trading the market and also people that just were fortunate enough to take some long positions during the first half of this 3-week rally. They may have looked at the NASDAQ getting above the 200-day moving average yesterday and taken a closer look at the chart, saying, you know what, short term, we've got a lot of optimism built in here. And we've got a lot of optimism built in, and it's just now we need more detail and more specifics on what it's going to be like turning the economy back on. So bear with me just 1 second. I'm going to try to see what's going on with Rich. And okay, I think he had something with where his office is, where he had to talk to someone for a couple of minutes. So I think the other thing that's very interesting today is there is an airline deal between the airline industry and the Treasury Department. There's $25 billion that's going to be used as a relief package for the airline industry. At least 30% of that is going to have to be repaid. It's going to be structured in terms of a 10-year low interest loan. And the rest of it is structured very similarly to these small business loans, where the other 70% is going to be grants to the airlines as long as they keep their employees on staff and they keep people on their payroll. And the reason that that's important, and I think a very smart way to structure that, is because if the airlines were to lay off 75% of their personnel, then when the economy got kicked back into gear, they would not necessarily be able to hire all those people back instantaneously. And it might take them 3 to 4 weeks to get their flight schedules back up to the level of what the anticipated traffic traffic would be and get all their people back in place. So in a similar way in which the small business PPP loans that are being run through Treasury and the Small Business Administration are saying that those loans will turn into grants if 75% of the money is used for payroll. With the airline package, 70% of that money has to be used. If 70% of that money is used to pay people their wages, salaries, and benefits, and if they retain 70% of their workforce, that money will be turned into a grant. There will also be potentially, and I'm looking to get more detail on this, but the U.S. Treasury will get warrants to buy up to 1% of the outstanding stock of each of the airlines that signs on to the deal. That's really a very small amount, very, very little dilution for current shareholders. And it will probably turn into non-voting stock to be held by some special funding vehicle of the Treasury. So there'll definitely be some pushback on this. You'll see some people gaslighting this as how can we bail out the airlines? They have the worst customer service of any industry out there, except for maybe the cable industry. But you'll see pushback from people on social media about it. Just take a look at the details. It's not a complete outright bailout. Someone was asking if there's going to be a second round of stimulus checks for consumers in addition to, which would be similar to what is going out just yesterday, today, and probably for a couple days this week. The checks of up to $1,200 per adult and up to $500 per child. That is, I think, to be determined. I think if there's a situation where I don't know if it would ever be selective based on states that stayed shut down longer than others. I think they'd like to avoid that. But I think depending on where we are at the end of May, they'll make a determination as to whether or not there's going to be a second round of stimulus checks. But I don't really have any specific insight on that. That's just kind of my best guess scenario. Any predictions when the tipping point will be for Main Street media to recognize the economy needs to be restarted? I think the only tipping point would be is when their ratings go down even lower than they currently are now. And clearly in an environment where people are streaming a lot of content that they haven't streamed before. Maybe they're also shifting over toward streaming on cable for their news and just general, information. It would be interesting to see if that cuts in potentially to the ratings of any of the mainstream cable or network TV news shows. I think that in general, just because it's a time of turmoil, news viewership is probably up and in demand by consumers, especially given the fact that there's so many people are at home. Where I don't necessarily think people are. I think people after a week or so try to avoid doing nothing but watching the news all day long because it gets very, very repetitive and maybe even a little depressing. I'm sure that viewership of key nightly news shows and probably the the Sunday GabFest news shows, I would imagine it's been up over the last 4 weeks. So somebody is saying they changed the 401k laws for the virus, but my 401k has not updated their rules. I think you might be referring to not having a penalty if you take money out of your 401k. I've read a couple different things on that. I'm not 100% clear on it, but I believe that you can take money out of a 401k or an IRA or some other self-directed retirement fund and put it back in within 3 years and not pay the 10% penalty. You will still, of course, have to pay capital gains tax, just like you would if you took it out during retirement years. But really what a lot of people do like to avoid at all costs is paying the 10% penalty for an early withdrawal. Clearly, you would want to check with your 401k provider. Depending on how they're staffed, it's possible that they just haven't updated their websites yet. So here's another question. What are some indicators that the market will not bounce back? Well, clearly, just bear with me just 1 second. Yeah. Hello. Hi. No, I'm still on. I'm trying to answer a few questions. What's going on? Really? Right. Okay. Right. So what message should you want me to put out? Right. Yeah. I think so. Right. All right. So look, that was Rich calling me on my cell phone, and he's got a technical issue at his end. His stream got cut off. He's not able to reconnect right now. He thinks it might be a very heavy traffic issue, which we just talked about. A tremendous amount of people are using streaming services that have never used them before. I'm sure all of the volume on streaming services are way off the charts. Just as an aside to that, Roku was up 10% yesterday. And I am totally unfamiliar with Roku as to where it stands in the pecking order of all of the video show streaming services. But that price move did catch my eye. Amazon obviously has a lot of things going for it right now. In addition to their streaming businesses, I'm sure a lot of people are buying a lot more stuff online rather than going to the store. Amazon traded above 2,200, posted a new all-time high. And you also had 5% gains from both Apple and Microsoft, both of which are most likely beneficiaries of a lot more demand for any type of streaming software or ancillary services. So I'm going to answer maybe a few more questions and then see if Rich calls me back in 10 or 15 minutes. But what we might do is just cut this short and see if the traffic dies out later in the day and we can come back on if there's a demand for it. We'd obviously put notifications out to people that are subscribers on all the different channels. And then just bear with us, keep in touch. And if we don't get back later today, we'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So one other question was indicators. Would the indicators be that the market will not bounce back? Well, I think it's important to realize here that we're in an environment, and it happens occasionally, where the market and the economy are two different things. Now, the market has bounced very significantly off its lows. The NASDAQ up 24%, the Dow up 29%, the S&P 500 up, I believe, 27% off the March 23 lows. That's just 2 weeks and a couple of days ago. So that's just a sign that people have some optimism that this isn't going to go on for months and months and months. Sure, we're going to have bad numbers for the first quarter, really bad numbers for the second quarter. It's probably going to dribble into the third quarter, but keep in mind, we're only 2 weeks into the second quarter. And the big uncertainty is how quickly can the economy come from basically being in a total stall mode to get at least into second gear after having been in first gear and almost in overdrive for the last few months of 2019 and the first 6 weeks of this year. I would just watch the general market average indicators, and I would look to see what big companies have to say about their timeline for bringing their operations back online, calling workers off furlough, and making statements that give people guidance that we're going to be at 50% capacity within 10 days, and we hope to get at a much higher rate 2 to 3 weeks after that. So someone is saying, if you had 3,400 to put in the market, where would you put it? I really can't make comments about individual stocks. I am currently still employed by a broker dealer, and because I'm not a registered analyst, I'm restricted from discussing individual stocks. Even if I was on one of the business shows, I could talk about the market and the sectors of the market a little bit, but I can't really get into giving comments or recommendations on individual stocks for regulatory reasons. I'm sorry about that, but that's the regulator goes crazy at stuff like that. I would say that if you really want to get some market exposure, I might not put it all in right here. If you were going to put it into a market-wide index fund or an ETF that represents some industry that you think you have some knowledge of and you like the concept of for the remainder of the year, just because we've had such a strong move off the lows that I really wouldn't be surprised to see the market sell off maybe 4 to 8% over the next week or two. Maybe go down and test 22,000 on the Dow, maybe test 2,300 on the S&P, and after the market's moved 25% in 3 weeks, I just wouldn't want to see people take, a big chunk of investable cash and put it all in one day, because I think it is likely we get a little bit of a pullback here. There are a lot of people that are talking about retesting the March lows. I get more and more of the opinion over the last couple of weeks that's just not going to happen. I actually think we did retest about a week and a half afterwards and held. Now, if the rollout of getting the economy back online doesn't really work and doesn't gather the steam that some people think it can, and if we do get another outbreak of the virus, maybe in areas where it hasn't been that strong, then that would be another variable that would, the market would not take kindly to that, because then they could say, oh boy, now we're going to shut down again, and we might shut down into the fall. I think that probability, that has a small probability, but it is something out there that you do have to keep in the back of your mind. I think the next few things you really want to look for in the news cycle are, when would the CDC alter their social distancing guidelines? When would they, when does this new wave of very easy tests where they can test saliva get pushed out really on a massive scale of millions of tests, not just to major cities, but also available somehow in rural areas? And when would then states or groups of states say, okay, we think we're ready to get back into action here, maybe on a rolling basis based on certain industries or certain geographic areas? So I don't see anything else still streaming in terms of questions. I'm not really even sure if I'm still live. But I think what we'll do is shut this down for now. Yeah, I see a question coming in now. Has the market baked in abysmal unemployment numbers? Yes, I think the market has baked in abysmal unemployment numbers. I think that we have had 17 million people file first-time unemployment claims over the last 3 weeks. If you had another 3 or 4 million people file this week, that would bring it up to 20 million. I think that might mean that we would be at maybe an unemployment rate of between 15 and 20%. And keep in mind that there are also still a lot of people that are not working productively in addition to that, because if your company got PPP money under the condition that 75% of it was used for payroll, and the airlines in this support package that was agreed to yesterday, if they keep 75% of their people on payroll, those people are not going to be actually working productively. They're just still on the payroll. So they're getting money and they're able to pay some bills. They're able to go to the store. They're able to pay rent, utilities, other basic services, order stuff online, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not really a productive economic employment. So what would trigger a retest of the lows? I really think to retest the March lows, you would have to see a if we're coming off the backside of the curve in the very high densely populated parts of the Northeast, you would have to see an second round of an explosion of virus cases, maybe in Chicago, maybe in Minneapolis, maybe in other second-tier market cities, St. Louis, Kansas City, Omaha, parts of Texas, Atlanta, parts of the middle part of the country that has just really been marginally affected so far, and also a much slower timeline on any of this potential plasma testing that they're talking about, plasma antibody testing. So we're a little over an hour into the day. We'll just do one real quick little market update here. The Dow is down a little over 2.5%, pretty much given up yesterday's gains. The S&P 500 is down 2.7%. It was up 3% yesterday, so it's not quite given up all of yesterday's gains. And the NASDAQ is doing a little bit better than that. After a 4% gain yesterday, the NASDAQ is down 2.25%, maybe 2.5%. So net, the NASDAQ is still up over the last couple of days. I think the Dow is under the weight of some big financial names. Goldman Sachs, American Express, JP Morgan, and also names like Boeing is not going to have a real easy trip back to the above the 200 level. Rich,
I'm back.
Wow.
So they totally they fixed it, but they totally crashed. So this is the deal, folks, with because I am, signed in with this particular software as the host and a skeleton crew, we are forced to use a browser-based system, right? And I am going to tweet out real quick while we have a few seconds anyway that I am back, because I was getting like loads of messages. What happened to you?
Yeah.
Let's
take a real quick break.
Sure,
Rich,
you take a break, Tim. I think you've earned it. All right. So we probably will end up doing this again anyway. Let's see. But basically what happened is when we're doing a skeleton crew, we're forced to use a browser-based system as opposed to our own area and our own servers, and which we have. But it's a little difficult to do on your own. So you use a browser-based system without having a producer to help at the moment. But given what happened today, I will see if she can teach me how to do it, at least at a simple level, so we are not at the mercy of a browser-based software, which I'm not going to name because, things happen, to people. So even if it's simple, I will figure out how to do this. Okay. So I got to thank Tim. I know it's really hard when you're like thrown out there on your own to have to do this. And I'll put a little disclaimer in there. So in the meantime, I'm sure Tim was going on about markets. That's his wheelhouse. So since I'm not going to stop for a break for a while, because I know the people who hung tight, want to get right into this. So that's what I just tweeted out. Let's do this. Let's get into the voter analysis in Arizona. Okay. And then I may wind up redoing some of this stuff tomorrow, because I lost almost a half an hour. I don't know how long I was gone for. But I lost quite a bit. So, I may wind up circling back to this. Okay, folks. So let's roll into this. Tim, I'm going to roll right into Arizona because I lost so much time. Okay. And we brought up that poll yesterday, okay, which basically showed Biden ahead by 7. And if you look even on some of our competitors' models, they may have leaned Arizona now to a toss-up. I don't know where they're at. I don't follow them. They are most of the models out there, to be nice, are knee-jerk reactionary models. They are following polls. All right, some of them are hybrids, but I've said this before, and I'm not trying to dog anybody. It's just I think it's pretty clear from their track records that they are glorified poll readers, and that's about it. If you have a model that is built on fundamentals and your assumptions are historical assumptions, public polling that sways with the news cycle should not move your ratings, gyrating them wildly back and forth. They should not move them all that much at all. They should be sound and only move and shift when the fundamentals of a race move and shift. All right. So I can see why Biden has led in almost every single poll out in Arizona, at least the ones that Real Clear Politics likes to aggregate. There are other pollsters out there that don't make it into the cool club, and they have shown a tighter race. But you might have noticed, like the crystal ball had Arizona, leaning to Trump for a while. I don't know where they are now. The Senate race was another story. Even on general consensus was a toss-up. Even on our model, it is a toss-up. We think Kelly is a very strong candidate, and we think McSally has, at this point, she's proven herself to be a rather weak candidate, although I think she's getting stronger.
She's done a lot better in the last couple months.
Yeah, she has done a lot better, and I think she's getting stronger. I see some people are popping back into him, which is why I rambled a little bit. I wanted to give them time if they were looking for Arizona to pop back in. Okay. So I think that McSally is getting stronger, but she still trails even this is public polling and our own analysis. She trails Kelly. He's a strong guy. His wife, if you remember, Gabby Giffords, was the victim of basically a nutcase who shot her in the head. And there's a lot of sympathy out there. And he also is a space hero, Tim. He's like a Bill Nelson. Yeah. He's a great American hero. Before I get into this, if I get dumped again, I will redo this show, period, from start to finish. Okay. But let's just jump into this in case something happens. So I want to show you, Arizona is absolutely getting more competitive. Let's take a look at the overall electorate, our usuals, okay? And you're going to see that Republicans still maintain an edge, which is why Donald Trump in our model maintains an edge, all right? And I know what the polling shows, but in the end, we do believe that he is still a slight favorite, and we're assuming that the economy, or at least the worst of it, will be behind us at that moment. If it's not, we will have to revisit Arizona, because that is a state that Democrats are getting. Obviously, Kirsten Sinema barely eked it out, and it was with some shenanigans like we talked about yesterday, but it is a competitive state. And Kelly Ward took over the Republican Party out there. I have to give some background on this. I do. The McCain wing of the Republican Party in Arizona has been a little childish. There's just no other way to put it. They have taken their ball and gone home because they don't agree with Donald Trump. They don't like that wing of the Republican Party, did not want Kelly Ward to take over as the state chair. If I was advising Kelly Ward, I would tell her to rebrand the state Republican Party. Rebrand it. Look at the vote that was held in what is it? The liberal Tulsa, right? So they had the vote with sanctuary cities. It went down by a 2-1 margin. If you have an electorate that agrees with you that much on issues, but they won't vote for your candidate, then you have a branding problem. You have a party branding problem. And I am not dumping that on Kelly Ward. There were this is because of the fighting back and forth between John McCain and Donald Trump. You've had a lot of big donors that have supported the Republican Party before Donald Trump became the head of the Republican Party, essentially, that refused to do it now because of the back and forth with the McCain family between Donald Trump. And they have not only have many of them not given Kelly Ward money that she needs, but many of them have actively just turned to Democrats. I mean, that's where and it's not because they essentially share their ideology, although it's true that establishment Republicans share a lot with establishment Democrats, more so than they do with Trumpism part of the Republican Party. But in the same token, they donated and supported people like John McCain, Jeff Flake, Mitt Romney for years. And this is the crybaby syndrome that Republicans under Donald Trump have had to deal with. And a state like Arizona, it's unfortunate for Kelly Ward. She's had to take the brunt of it. So if I was advising Kelly Ward, I would tell her to take it right to the voter. First of all, there would be a lot of research that would have to go into it, but take your argument right to the voter. Rebrand the party, remake their image, because there are a lot of voters in Arizona right now who have a very bad perception, independent voters who have a very negative perception of the Republican Party, and it is grounded in falsehoods. We've gone over that. I'm not talking out of my, I'm not making an educated guess here. This is, I can't get into it and show it to you guys because it's private client stuff that cannot be shown. It belongs to them. Once the research is done, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to them. But McSally lost a good deal of her own base in 2018. Yes, part of that was because she wasn't fully embracing Donald Trump and she lost some of the Trump vote. That's true. But other part of that was she allowed the media and the Democrats to take a wing of her party that is moderate females, and I'll show you Maricopa County soon. She lost it by a hair, and she lost the state by a hair. Donald Trump carried Maricopa County in 2016 by 5 points. Jeff Flake barely carried it, and he barely carried the state by 3 points. A Republican must carry Maricopa County. It is a very big county, a well-populated county, a historically conservative county. It's getting more liberal because there are more independents that have been flooding into that county, and Republicans have allowed their image to go to crap. And if they want to undo this damage, they're going to have to rebrand and reach out. It is what it is. Otherwise, they'll be hoping to squeeze out a few victories here and there. It's the difference, Tim, between winning the state by 7 points, like Donald Trump. He carried Maricopa by about 5 points. That's it, because the rest of the state outside of one more area is basically conservative. And Sinema did a great job getting her vote out. Let's take a look at some of these numbers and you'll see what I mean. Sinema clobbered McSally among independents. She beat her bad. And she got her vote out. And yes, they were dumpster diving for ballots. That absolutely happened. But a lot of what happened was there isn't uniformity statewide with voting rules, Tim, with early vote and how long that can go on. Yeah. And Maricopa flipped because the liberal precincts in Maricopa allowed early voting and in-person early voting to continue throughout that weekend and into Monday, whereas Republican precincts did not. And they basically, there were a lot of shenanigans. And I can link before Ward took over, the other previous state chairman had lawyers basically investigate what happened. And that report got almost no media attention. And it was an incredibly illuminating report, because if you remember, Tim, that night, our modeling looked very much like the New York Times modeling. People were following both or one. And even the New York Times was actually more bullish on McSally than we were. We were in the low tens of a percentage point victory to about 1.5%, whereas theirs was about 0.5 point to 2 points. And then what happened is Maricopa County just started to come in with those last votes, those late votes that were counted. Those were what we were just talking about. That was the later voting that Democratic precincts allowed. When these votes come in, folks, Once we have a nice sample of early vote, once we have a nice sample of in-person early voting, we have a nice sample of absentee voting, and we have a nice sample of election day voting. This isn't a matter of whether people make, on my end, a longhand math mistake, although I do still love longhand, right, Tim?
Right.
I still
Rich,
love it, and I write it out.
Rich, you just might explain real briefly that because you probably just assume that everybody knows it, but early voting almost always ends maybe the Thursday before
That's right. Yeah,
the
I should have
vote,
explained
which
that.
is on a Tuesday. And then there's no early voting Friday, Saturday, Sunday,
Friday,
Monday.
Saturday, Sunday, and Monday.
And then Tuesday's the official voting day.
And yes.
And what they did was they just ran it all through.
And what, like Tim's saying, that has historically been the case. And even I will link that report, Tim, because it's important. Even in the analysis that the lawyers had done in retrospect, what they had found was in the past, other Maricopa County recorders did not allow early voting unless it was extreme circumstances, Tim, and they had to prove it. They didn't allow it Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Right.
Whereas not only did this one, who now you might have guessed is a liberal, not only did they allow it, but they didn't tell Republicans that they were going to allow it in liberal precincts. Right. They opened the doors for liberals in liberal precincts, and they kept Republicans in the dark. And when we were going into that specific vote, there was about 180,000 votes left, estimated in our model. And that at that point was getting confirmed by the Department of Elections, Secretary of State. There was about 180,000 votes left. Before they came in and started to get counted, we had a great sample of all of the different voting categories. Early, absentee, mail. A lot of vote is mail, by the way, folks. And then election day. In Arizona, it is not uncommon for mailing votes to account for about 80% of the vote. That's how much. So we're talking about the modeling had a very large sample, and the modeling was showing about a 3 to 3.5% edge for McSally in Maricopa County. There would have been no statistically sound reason for those votes to change. We look at this in the precinct level. We already took into account how much the vote was coming in conservative versus liberal precincts. There were precincts that have historically been conservative. We were seeing basically just registered Democrat vote coming in. I'm telling you, it was 90-10, more sometimes. Some of these chunks, big chunks, were almost uniformly for Sinema. And that flipped Maricopa County at the last minute to Sinema by a hair. And she carried the state by a hair. And even with those shenanigans, my point I'm trying to make to the Kelly Wards of the world and other Republicans is that even with those shenanigans, McSally still could have won this race had she done things a little bit differently. Yep. And there is a problem with how certain independents in this state, a lot of new people that have been coming in, there's a problem with how they view the Republican Party. And they're going to have to change that, or it'll turn into Virginia. Okay, that's where you're headed if you don't change course soon. And if that happens, like we spoke about briefly yesterday, if that happens, then any presidential candidate, and Donald Trump, I believe, is the only one in the bench who could do it, will have to rely on the blue wall Rust Belt states and run the table out there. Plus, they have to hold Florida. So you don't want to be put in that position. It's the only state, and actually, I shouldn't say Virginia, Tim. It will turn into Nevada. That's what it'll turn into. And if they don't course correct soon. All right. So let's get into this. Democrats are about 32% of the electorate. Over the years, Democrats have made a lot of gains here in just straight party registration. Republicans never had a huge one. What happened is they used to win more of the independent vote, a lot more. Okay. There's a huge contingency here. And actually, it's more than that because pollsters will lump all of these candidates into that. There is an independent party vote there. There's more than 200,000 of those voters. But with nuns, when you really lump them up together, it's over 1 million, Tim. It can be over 1 million. And if you were to poll, by the time we break down who is and who isn't more likely to vote, right? So Arizona turnout in 2018 was huge. Republicans are about 35% of the electorate. Democrats are about 32% of the electorate. Republicans cannot afford, given base turnout, let's assume all things are equal. Republicans cannot afford to lose independents like McSally lost them. It was just brutal in some of these areas. You can't do that. And you definitely cannot lose 10 to 14% of female Republican voters. You just can't. Very much what happened in Pennsylvania, we talked about yesterday, happened in Arizona in 2016. The polls indicated that was not going to be the case. Donald Trump was going to lose a lot of those women to Hillary Clinton. Not only did he not lose them, but he won independents, albeit by a small margin. He won them, which was enough to give him Maricopa by about 4.8% or whatever it was, and it gave him the state by 7. And that is why, by the way, we called Arizona so early, while other networks were giving Hillary Clinton a shot, if you remember, Tim, late into the night, giving her a shot of holding Arizona. Once it became clear that Donald Trump was going to hold that 5-point edge in Maricopa, it was over.
Them still had not called it by the time that they called Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania.
It's
totally Donald
ridiculous.
Trump the next president, but we still don't know if he's going to win Arizona or not.
Totally ridiculous. It was over, Tim. It was over. Georgia too, by the way. Georgia too. And by the way, that endorsement yesterday for Donald Trump was a big deal. We should get into that when we talk about the endorsements with Biden and Obama. That was a big deal. And the endorsements don't really matter, but when you have an African-American community leader come out and endorse you, it matters. You know what? 2 words, Jim Clyburn. It matters. All right. So Donald Trump got that yesterday in Georgia. And
from the Democrat member of the House of Representatives.
That's right. But he's a community leader, and that's how the African-American community goes out to vote.
Right, exactly.
And people don't realize that. And when a pollster calls them up and asks them, they're not going to tell you that they're jumping ship this time. That's all. I was just going to say, I don't even view Georgia
the member of the House of Representatives in Georgia endorsed Doug Collins over Kelly Loeffler, but I think this guy is always been
Doug Collins is going to thrash her, Tim.
Very close to Collins and one of his best buddies.
Yeah, well, there you go. But he's still before anything like that, he was way ahead. That scandal with
you think he's way ahead there?
He is. I know he is.
I saw they delayed that vote, right?
Yeah, I don't know the exact date.
Is it in June?
I don't know the exact date. I can check it out right now. Georgia Senate election. Let's see. It looks like. Hold on. Well, I'll look it up while we're talking here because I got to go through. It'll take forever. But keep on. Why don't you do that? Go to Ballotpedia is always the best. I think it's this. I don't have it. It's in my. I don't want to say something that's wrong. So if you can grab it, that would be great. I thought it was actually earlier than that, but I could be totally wrong. But Doug Collins, I have seen internal polling on this from multiple sides. Doug Collins is ahead. He's ahead pretty significantly. And then I think what happened there, Tim, is that insider trading story hurt her really bad, even worse. And she was already down by double digits, but now it could be like a 2-to-1 blowout. If that, I'm talking about just their vote. It could be a 2-to-1 blowout if that story doesn't start to loosen the impact it had on her vote share. We'll see though. But I am scrolling down here to show you guys ethnicity in Arizona now. It's broken down, and this is the entire voter file again. 64% white, very much like Florida at this point. Only with a smaller African-American contingency. So Democrats really rely on constituency, by the way. Democrats really rely on this bigger Hispanic vote share, which can turn out to be a much bigger share of the 2-3 points matters. So if the electorate is 14% Hispanic, it will be significantly easier for a Republican than, let's say, the electorate was 18%. 4 points could have a big deal if you do not appeal if as Republicans, they don't make an effort to reach out to these new people. Interestingly, what we're seeing too is that it is immigration, not migration, that has made the state more competitive. Let me say that again. It is immigration, not migration, that has made the state more competitive. Like Texas, there have been a lot of recent movers from places like California, New York, Virginia, and they are going to states like Arizona and Texas and offsetting some of the damage that has been in the pipeline for 2-3 decades now from illegal immigration. Eventually, folks, those people have kids. They're born here. They become U.S. citizens. They're even more liberal than their parents. All right? So when you hear this suburban vote spiel, it has some merit, but in truth, and the census data that's coming out this year is going to prove me right. In truth, this educated suburban vote is a lot less white. And that's why it's becoming more democratic, or at least in part why. It's not as simple as the media narrative tries to portray it as. Shocker, as usual. They try to dumb things down, and usually they're doing it to try to, hide something from you. All right. So anyway, 64% Hispanic, very much like Florida at this point, with less of an African-American constituency. So that's why this state is still, while it is getting competitive, it is still, a slight Republican edge. Okay. Now, Kelly is just a very strong candidate, and he's actually winning a nice chunk of the Republican vote, and he's doing very well among independents. So that's McSally's. It's happening. It's like deja vu for McSally out there all over again. She has got to consolidate her base, and she has got to make healthcare a bigger part of her platform. And then she's got, there's no other way to put this. She's got to scare the hell out of affluent suburban people. And I mean that by Democratic candidates, no matter how nice or how independent they seem, Tim, Republicans are going to have to make the case. How independent was Joe Manchin when we came down to the grind, when the hit the fan? How independent was Joe Manchin when it really mattered? How independent was Doug Jones? These people go in there, and Connor Lamb and the rest of them, they go in there pretending to be moderate, and they throw it under the bus. So that is something that's going to have to be part of her. And by the way, Kirsten Sinema, she's in that category too. She did a great job at balancing her image. And then when it came down to that vote, in the end, she caved like everybody else caves, right? So let's look at a voter propensity score. And here is how I'm going to show you how sometimes there are lopsided victories in this state, even though it is a very competitive state. All right, so now we got the vote propensity score. The voters in the average electorate in Arizona, folks, it's older. The average age I'm talking about. The median age, even in 2018, though, it usually benefits Republicans, but it didn't hold it back in 2018. And that's largely because the exit polls are only gathering up the information from people they're talking to. And if you have 180,000 ballots or so in one county, you didn't talk to those people. So you wouldn't have known. Anyway, let's look at it when we look at who is actually the most likely to vote. And the independent share of the electorate goes down quite a bit here. Although even in the best case scenario for Republicans, it's still going to be at least 20%. But they are typically more. Last time they were 30-something%, Tim, if I remember correctly. So anyway, Republicans jump up to 44%, Democrats 34%. So there's a significant edge here for people who we know are going to vote in a general presidential election. All right. That is not a We're not talking about primaries. Can be funny. We're talking about a general presidential election. All right. So again, let's go down. Just take a look at gender. About, very much on par with what it is nationally. Marital status, almost 45% are married, and then the Caucasian goes to 75.2%. But my point is, if you compare these two, look at the wealth that Democrats really do have in this state that they can tap. And in fact, I'll take the vote propensity score off. Let's take a look at the map. Protestant didn't change all that much for those who weren't paying attention before because I didn't say it out loud. It remains about 48, just near 50%. Catholic, 23%. So that is obviously, we're talking about ethnic Catholics here, a lot of them, Hispanics. Let's take a look at the map, and I'm going to show you like this hidden reservoir of voters that Democrats have that they could reach out to. All right, let's map this puppy. And actually, let's keep the vote. Let's keep this first. Let's keep that up first, because I want to show when you're looking, this is how sometimes we have some outsized victories for Republicans statewide. Look at Steve Ducey. He clobbered his Democratic opponent over there. Very popular governor, Let's look at where these voters are coming from. And then when I uncheck the vote propensity score, you'll see, basically, and actually, it's covering up a lot of Republicans on this. Let me X out Democrats so you can see them. See, very much overlapped in the same. And Arizona is funny like that. There are vast areas in Arizona, and we saw this a little bit, but much less so with Pennsylvania. We saw this a little bit yesterday. There are just great numbers of areas where there aren't a lot of voters, okay? And it's concentrated. This is why Maricopa is so important. So important. This is a huge county. Here it is right here, folks. Okay. Traditionally Republican leaning county. Even at one point, conservative county. All right. It's because of everything else. There are a lot of Republicans in the Phoenix area. They're just a lot more Democrats. So they have to rely on the outer areas of Maricopa to flip that. And then Republicans also, they have a lot of people in Tucson, but watch this. Pima County is a Democrat county. Okay. It's just, you can actually see how much it overlaps Republicans here, even though while Republicans are overshadowed here because the color, it's really more about the RGB scale than it is about consolidation. You can see Republicans bleeding out and around them over there, which gives you a good sense of how they're overlapping and that they extend a little bit further. All right. Mojave, that's one area where the McSally campaign believed that maybe they had some more vote out there that would flip it. Yuma as well. But in the end, it was just not enough. Yavapai is a nice chunk of vote for Republicans, but in the end, it was just not enough. If you do not carry Maricopa as a Republican, you will lose, period. So here we go. Let's blend it back. Let's say there's this. So there you have the Republicans, but let's get rid of this vote propensity score. Okay. And then you guys are going to see other places where Democrats have a chance to, actually I just have to cancel it out of the query, where Democrats have a chance to take this state by tapping a larger reservoir than it appears that they have in a likely voter model. All right. And here we go. And then I'll add independents too, Tim, so people can see where that comes from, right? So you can see in your mind's eye, if you weren't paying attention before, these are Republican areas all around here, except for, Santa Cruz, Pima, all the rest of the state is Republican. Battleground now is Maricopa. You do see that even in Coconino, there's some areas there where there are more. But what's more important is we didn't see them in Maricopa as much, and it was not as dense when we looked at the likely voter area. There are very low propensity voters that they have to tap. Also in Pima, where she ran it up. Go and look at Cinema's margin in Pima. She killed it for a midterm election. I mean, she did well, period. But she absolutely killed it for a midterm.
It was really amazing, really impressive. There's no other way to say it. It was impressive. Let's add nuns and independents. And independent in Arizona means they are registered in as an independent. And there are different parties sometimes running as the independent candidate. There is a wealth of third-party options in Arizona typically. And then nuns is basically an unaffiliated voter. They are not, registered as anything, and they're very important. There's a lot of them, a lot. And last time, Tim, I think Democrats made up. It was very much what I'm showing you right now. It was about 34% Republican, so they ran about a point or two behind where they should be in a good base turnout. And it was about 32% Democrat, if I remember, and then 33, 34, or something around that line for independent. What we just, blanket throw down as independent. And she lost them. McSally lost them. So it was just too much. Anyway, where are these people, right? They're everywhere. They're everywhere. And unfortunately for Republicans, if this is going to be a concentration of independents and you're going to lose independents, then you're going to lose Maricopa County unless Democrats just don't go out to vote. And do you want to rely on somebody not going out to vote? Democrats should not want to rely on Republicans not going out to vote, and Republicans shouldn't rely on Democrats not going out to vote. If you cannot win these people, or at least fight it to a draw, because there are more Republicans, we'll look at Maricopa specifically in a second. If you cannot fight this to a draw over here, and Donald Trump actually squeaked it out, he won them by a little, but he won them. If you can't fight this to a draw, you're going to lose the county. You're going to lose the state. Just take a look at what I'm showing everybody here. Look at how the state is. Look at where the voters come from. We know this is going to be a bloodbath for a Republican candidate. They're going to win everything else, basically. Almost everything else, except for Santa Cruz. La Paz, Yuma, Mojave, there's not enough votes is what I'm saying. Yavapai, that's a nice little chunk. Yavapai is probably the second biggest chunk. It's just not enough. And by the way, Cinnamon did really well down here. So, it's not like you can just, and Republicans lost congressional districts because of this. You have got to win these people because you will lose Maricopa. And if you lose Maricopa, the state is gone. Donald Trump, again, won it. If you lose it, it's gone. It's a wrap. All right. Let's take a look specifically at Maricopa County. And on election day, you better have a nice buffer, because the stuff that Democrats pulled in 2018 is how they flipped Maricopa. They were losing it all night, all next day. They just kept stuffing in ballots and they flipped it. That modeling is almost, Tim, right? You've seen it. That modeling is almost never wrong. It is only wrong when something drastic happens. Why? Because JavaScript has already JavaScript, which is code for people who know, it has already calculated the break among mail-in vote. It has already calculated the break among election day vote. It already knows which precincts are giving how much percent of their vote, how much of that is left, how much of that will be part of the overall electorate. What does it represent as a share of the overall electorate? And if it's saying this is what's going to happen, it's going to be between this range. The only way to change that is if the breaks are drastically adjusted with 8. I mean, Tim, when was it drastically adjusted in Arizona? It was like, I would have to go back and look, but we already had like 75, 80%, maybe more of the vote in, right? Because about 80% came in on the initial call. So we had to have had 80% because almost 80% came in with the initial dumping of results. And with that initial dumping, it showed Cinema put up one heck of a fight. I don't want to curse on this show. Cinema put up one heck of a fight, but that ultimately McSally was going to eke it out. And it only drastically changed when those 180,000 ballots from Maricopa came in, and they were completely different. And it's not explainable, folks, by a normal vote pattern. It's not. All right, let's take a look at Maricopa, and then I'm going to run an actual analysis of this puppy. There's Maricopa. Let's add for the map. Let's add nuns and independents. And just because Democrats look so much like there's so much here, all right, you can see the totals. Republicans are they are the largest share of vote in Maricopa County with 765,000 plus. Democrats have gained quite a bit, but they still remain 665, almost 666. And nuns and independents are a huge chunk of the vote. They are nearly as much. They're more than Democrats in Maricopa County. There are more nuns and independents than Democrats in Maricopa. Much more, about 700,000, which is almost as much as Republicans. So Republicans run out immediately with a 65,000 vote edge. If they do not fight this to a draw or better, then they are at risk of losing Maricopa. And really, this is actually one of the easier states to analyze, Tim, because the population is not spread out. Like we looked at Pennsylvania yesterday. We're talking about 67 counties, 50 plus are Appalachia categorized, Appalachia region. The rest you got the southeastern part of the state, which looks completely different than the rest of the state. But then you have this patch out in the southwestern region of the state, which is, again, completely, it doesn't even, Pittsburgh, Allegheny, doesn't even look like Philadelphia, but they're both Democratic strongholds, very different from the rest of the state. Erie looks nothing like Bidentown, it's everywhere. This is an easy state to understand. And the name of the game here.
Yeah, it's all Phoenix.
The name of the game here.
A little bit of Flagstaff, but I mean, it's really all Phoenix and, metropolitan area, which is Maricopa County.
Not lose Maricopa County. Right. And then we can make it even easier. Like Tim just said, at least fight. And I'm talking about from a Republican standpoint. If you are a Republican, you cannot allow a Democrat to wallop you in the Maricopa burbs among these independents. And you can't lose 15% of your own base. You can't do that. Even 15% of females in your base. You just can't do it. If Donald Trump didn't do it, then you are wrong if you do it. And maybe Trump will this time. I don't know. It depends on I really do think the economy will have a lot to do with a place like this. But also too, because those burbs, female voters do care a lot about the economy and they care about healthcare. It's really that simple. And then if there are certain things with immigration, they're funny like that, Tim. They get scared, when there's like crime gets high and there's a lot of illegal immigration crime. A lot of headlines about illegal immigrants killing people in a neighborhood, 15 minutes away. They get scared with that stuff, which is why the media ignores it, by the way.
Right.
That's why the media will ignore it. So you're going to have to make that case for them because they're not going to do it. Let's run an analysis in Maricopa just so you can see why, by the way, now that you guys have seen the party numbers, okay? Now that you've seen the party numbers, this is what the problem I had with, I forgot his first name already. Nice guy. Follow each other on Twitter. Ohio Predictive Insights. This is the issue that we had with that poll. 50, what was it? Biden plus 7 or something, right? And it was Trump down at like 42% of the vote or something. Do I still have that uploaded here? I don't think I do, folks. I do. Let's show this. Okay. Now that I showed you the party identification alone in this state, the idea that Donald Trump's at 43% is difficult for me to swallow. It's not just Donald Trump, anybody. It seems to me that a Republican has a floor out there of probably around 45, Tim, 45, 46%. I just don't see any Republican being that far down. I mean, I just showed it to you. Why? I just showed it to you. There are too many Republicans for that, right? Like they would have to be winning almost none of the independent vote. I mean, it's just, it's not a leap to get from 35, 36% to 43. It's not a leap at all. If you're doing halfway decent with independents, you must be getting crushed. And that to me, I have a hard time swallowing it, Tim. I really do. Let's look at Maricopa specifically. Okay. Here is Maricopa, and Republicans have, like we said before, a slight edge here. All right. A little bit more, about 5 points. Okay. And then we have a large independent and none vote, 32%. It's larger than I have to repeat this again. It's so important. It's larger than the Democratic vote out there in Maricopa. I mean, how many times have I said it already, Tim? I mean, I really feel like the need to say it again. You cannot get clobbered with these voters. You have to try to fight this to a draw. It's even more male in Maricopa. Like Tim was just talking about Flagstaff before. A lot of veteran groups out there. Lots of veteran groups. Conservative veteran groups. It's more male than the state as a whole. Think about that. Men are obviously more likely to be Republican. Okay. It's more white, although slightly, than the state as a whole. If you're not going to carry anything but the white vote, then you must do better in the counties where the white vote represents a larger share of the electorate. And this is from simple mathematics here, folks. I'm not trying to make any statement about who appeals to who. And yes, if you poll Arizona, Donald Trump's approval rating among Hispanics is actually not half bad there. That's not. And it will get higher. I will say this because it's very important. If the economy starts to come back and it's looking decent, it will get higher as we get to the election. You saw it with Barack Obama. You saw it with George W. Bush. Incumbent presidents, as long as they do not have a crisis or a bad economy, their approval polling numbers will begin to rise when around Labor Day. This is a good, a lot of people use that. Things are different now. We get more information quicker, but still Americans are simply not paying attention. And when they do, it becomes a question of whether or not you want to risk moving to somebody who's untested, unproven. This is why part of the big reason why incumbents are very strong, because it's hard for people, who are truly independent. I'm not talking about partisans. I'm talking about the truly persuadable voters. It's hard for people to make a decision to throw out a president who is doing a decent job, a good job. Americans do not like to rock the boat. Persuadable Americans do not want the boat rocked all the time, which is why impeachment hurt Democrats so badly. They don't like to rock the boat. If things are going well, they want things to continue to go well. They do not want to throw in a giant X factor. Right, Tim? You understand what I'm saying? They don't want to throw in a giant X factor into their life. So that's why I stress the economy so much, because it is important. That is the one thing that'll make people say to themselves, maybe it is time for a change, to give somebody else a better shot and somebody else different a shot. If it isn't in their money, then they're flush, then they're not going to want to put that at risk. It's very simple and basic stuff here we're talking about. But again, I'm not talking about partisans. I'm talking about the truly persuadable American. All right. So it looks like we have some questions actually. So why isn't Trump talking about healthcare? That's a good question. I think right now, with everything that's going on, it is probably an ideal time to to add, that to your list of things to talk about. But presidents, they're very busy. Republicans in general, it can't just be Trump. Republicans in general need an answer to Democrats on healthcare. It was the single most important issue in 2018. The single most important issue. And Democrats were overwhelmingly trusted to handle healthcare over over Republicans, even though Republicans had great marks on the economy. It was a midterm, and that wasn't the issue on their mind. That's another thing I want to point out. When things are going well, when something with an issue is going well, and I'm going to use the economy as an example. When the economy is doing well, or any issue seems to have been addressed, then it becomes less important in the mind of the voters. Okay, that's why during a recession or during a weak recovery like Obama, the economy was so important to people. It was number one, and they thought Trump was the man for the job. That is why Democrats got clobbered in these areas where they hadn't in years. They never saw it coming and they won't admit it because they continuously try to say, well, the Trump economy was really, attributable to Obama. For myriad reasons, we've shown through empirical evidence that is ridiculous. They were two totally different economies. But putting all of that aside, if it were true, and if all of the data we've shown, Tim, is wrong, and they're right, and Donna Brazil and the rest of them are right, then why was it such an important issue to voters in 2016? When the economy starts to do better, it becomes less important in the mind of the voter, and other issues will begin to rise. And Democrats are very good at that, by the way. They reckon, they either reckon economy, even though George Bush presided over the last reckoning. This isn't really the same thing, what's going on now. They preside, or they have a very weak recovery. A Republican president comes in, does something about it, and then they are very good at these wedge issues. The environment, healthcare, and, when you rack them up, it doesn't even matter if one of them is not the most important one, because most of the time elections are won on the margins. Education, by the way, that is a wedge issue that Republicans have a very serious, very real opportunity to take away from Democrats. Absolutely. And they're not more vocal about that either. So on the question of why don't they talk about healthcare more, I can't answer that because I'm not a Republican strategist, but they should. They absolutely should. And when they did dominate healthcare, Tim, where did it get us? It got us a Republican House, a Republican Senate, 2 wave elections in a row. But separated, of course, by Obama's reelection.
Right.
But what did it get us in 2018? It got us a Democratic House. I mean, healthcare is just that important. All right. Let's go on here, Tim. Because I've been rambling. I know you carried it for a half hour while I was gone, but I've been rambling for a while. I didn't hear anything of it. Can we just have 30 seconds to 2 minutes on what's going on in the markets? Because
the market's a little bit off their lows of the day right now. The Dow and the S&P are down less than 2.75%. That's about a 650 point decline for the Dow. But it's still, well above 23,000. The S&P is around 2760. That's down about 2.6%. The NASDAQ is outperforming. It's down 1.9%. It was up 4% yesterday. The NASDAQ's at the 8350 level. One thing that we really didn't mention earlier, and we kind of botched yesterday, is that oil was in a sharp decline yesterday. I had a little bit of glitch in my system when I was trying to talk about it late in our 2-hour stretch yesterday. But oil was down 9.5% yesterday. So even though you had this oil production cut agreement between Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia and Russia, technically the OPEC plus nations, it really became a sell on the news event. A lot of people were thinking, well, maybe they're going to be able to cut as much as 15 million barrels a day. They only cut like 9.7 million barrels a day. Even if they had cut a lot more, the real reality with oil is there is just a ridiculous oversupply of oil everywhere. And that is just not going to be worked off until you get the economy kicked into gear.
Interestingly,
Not just here, but all around the globe. We need people, driving. We need some chatter that we're a month away from the beginning of the summer driving season. And we need this of oil to start to be worked off. It's not going to just be worked off by production cuts, even if you cut it by 20%.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that is a big deal toward starting to get the economies here and other places around the globe back kicked into gear. Oil, $20. It's just not good for anyone.
Looking at that, we're talking about oil, and I was going to bring it up before I got bumped out earlier. And, the retail, when we were looking at the retail sales report, I was going to bring it up. What Tim is saying is just spot on. And actually, if you take
Did you catch the gasoline sales portion of the retail?
Negative 17.2.
I'm surprised. Well, it was only half the month. It could be negative 35% in April.
I am not a betting man, but if I was, I'd be willing to wager that it's going to be revised.
Maybe not 35, but it could be 30.
Yeah, absolutely.
30. Now the truckers are still rolling, and the truckers are, obviously with the activity at the grocery stores and with the online purchases, the truckers are probably, I bet diesel fuel consumption is probably up.
We had that chatter too, Tim, where people were saying that the coronavirus could be spread through gasoline stations. There were reports all over the place with that. But in the end, it really is. I mean, that couldn't have helped. But in the end, it really is just a matter of there is no demand. People aren't moving.
Right.
They're flooded with the supply. Go back to Trump in the press conference a week or two ago, where the guy had no idea how supply and demand works. And Trump was like, are you aware of how supply and demand works? There's nobody on the roads. There's too much supply and people aren't buying. It's just now we have that confirmed for half of the month of March, basically. And we'll get revisions to this next month. We'll get a revision for March. This is a preliminary, always is. That's why actually the technical name of the report is Advanced Retail Sales and Foods. All right. So
it's some surveys, and then the real data come in later.
Right. And then
so it'll probably be revised lower, would be my guess.
Yeah, me too. I would wager to say, like I said, I'm not a betting man. I don't like betting. I can't stand it. I work too hard for my money. I don't like to bet it and watch it fly out the window. It's just not it's not my shtick, But if I was, I would say that it's going to be probably revised downward significantly. I mean, it's just anybody who is still on the roads at this time, there is no traffic anywhere. I mean, just nowhere. On the flip side of that, there's some.
Rich, give me 2 minutes. Somebody's buzzing the door.
Sure. There is some good news to that, folks. I mean, when there is no nobody on the road, there's less motor vehicle accidents, and if you are going somewhere, it's easier for you to get somewhere, especially if you live in a congested area. But overall, the economy must come first. The economy must come first. And if you didn't catch Trump's press conference yesterday, soon we'll be playing clips of stuff. It's going to be sooner rather than later because of me getting bumped out today. That lit a fire under my butt to do things a little bit differently from now on. So we're going to do that. But basically, if you were watching that yesterday, Trump was pretty clear that he wants to move this along. And I know Tim differs on this, but I don't think everywhere in the country is going to be the same as the northeastern part of the country. I think that there will be Democratic governors and mayors
who want to be a pain. They're just going to be. This morning on Fox and Friends, Bill de Blasio was on. I saw the tweet. I'm like, I got to catch this. Bill de Blasio goes on Fox and Friends and he says, I don't want to reopen stuff too early. I'd be more concerned specifically about schools. He said, I am not convinced it's safe for our children yet. We've been over the data on this, folks. I've showed you the data. The risk to children is nil. All right. Almost nil. Pneumonia is 87 times more dangerous than the coronavirus to children. All right. Or to the under 25 age category. But that's what he said this morning. All right. So without the point of all of this is the economy has to come first, because with no economy, no revenue, no public health. I mean, this is a very simple equation. And we're going to see these governors and these mayors, everybody, even de Blasio said it on the interview this morning, that the federal government needs to come in and fill the hole in their state budgets. I mean, Tim, the problem with that is they never do anything with a scalpel, right?
Right.
And nothing's ever done with a scalpel. It's always just done with a hacksaw or a butcher's cleaver. They're never going to come in and say, well, cover the cost. The federal, okay, let's make a deal. The federal government will cover the expenses that states have had due to the coronavirus, healthcare. But then they'll say, well, no, because this hurts so many other areas and we have this hole and you need to plug this hole for us. And that's it. It will never be targeted, ever. And we're going to have states who have been mismanaging their budgets for decades now.
Right.
I mean, some of these
and the big structural issue you have is that states have to balance their budget and the federal government does not.
That's right. That's right. And down here, look, there is a way for states to do this. We had budget reform under Rick Scott. We're a huge state and it worked. The difference is New York, New Jersey, Illinois, California actually is, while they do have budget problems, Tim, they're a little different because we don't always just look at the budget and how their shortfalls are and pension liabilities, stuff like that. We also look at how much they give to the federal government and get back. And in many respects, there are a lot of red states that take more from the federal government that they give. That's just true. But they don't have these huge pension burdens and other problems that make them they're insolvent at this point, and they're going to get bailed out instead of having to account for this nonsense that they've been doing. You cannot promise people this stuff, Tim, and then we'll end up tacking it on to the federal debt and growing -30 for the quarter. You can't just cut your way out of this problem, even on the federal level. You have to grow your way out of it as well. It's really two sides.
I would rather see, and I don't know what structurally would have to be changed. I would rather see them allow the states to run a deficit for 3 to 5 years and then work it off than just get it bailed out by the federal government and have that added to the federal deficit.
I totally agree.
I mean, it's an unprecedented situation. Let the states run a deficit for 5 years, and then let them work it off.
And a state budget, Tim, a state debt, a budget shortfall isn't a national security issue.
Right.
Like the federal debt is a national security issue. It's not just about finance and it's not. I mean, it's not just about fiscal policy is my point. It's a national security issue when you have a debt that you simply cannot pay off. During the Great Recession, China and Russia could have done us in. They could have. But, the big bad boogeyman didn't do it. Now we're going to be in potentially we'll have to see who buys this debt, Tim. What's your thoughts on that? Because we really could go a couple directions here on all of this money printing we're doing. we could go a couple directions, where we could have foreign nations buy off this debt, or we could go another route, but it's really the one route is less on, less of giving, China and others our debt. But if we do basically buy our own debt, then we put ourselves at risk of inflation. It's like the only good thing we have going for us at this point is that the whole world is in fiat mode. The whole world is in irresponsible mode. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that the debt, if they accelerated the 30-year bonds that they would sell, or if they tried to sell the 50-year bond, it would sell, because we have positive interest rates, and a large chunk of the rest of the world does not. So you have negative rates in most of Europe, although I did see that Italy's rate is up to 1.7%.
Like you spoke about the other day, Italy, people don't realize it. Italy is like what, number 3?
They're the 3rd largest issuer of sovereign debt on the planet, but Japan is still running 0 interest rates, and Germany is still running 0 to slightly negative interest rates. So our debt would sell just on a relative value trade. I don't doubt that at all. Even during a period of time going back a few years when China did sell off 5% of the treasuries that they owned, that was absorbed by the market very easily, and I believe that rates actually went down during that time frame.
Right.
So there's a lot of people, there's a lot of fear mongering about what if China decided to sell our debt. They could make our bond rates go up from 1% to 5%. I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all.
Right.
Because they all they'd be doing is they'd be significantly decreasing the value of all the other debt, U.S. debt that they own. And if they sold some off gradually, like they did a few years ago, it would just be absorbed very easily. It's the size of that market is unfathomable.
I was just looking, because while we're talking about the markets, and if I did, by the way, I'm just looking through some questions because I want to get some questions answered since I disappeared for 20 minutes today. I don't know her real name, but Lemon Minty. Yeah, if I said that and then I misspoke about Arizona being 60% non-white, if I said that, then I definitely misspoke. I mean, I put the number up, that it is whiter when the electorate is ironed out. What I was trying to show, though, is that it's very close to Florida when you look at the entire pool of voters. All right. What that should say is that should be a bit of a warning sign for Republicans that there are muscles to flex that aren't being flexed, is my point. And Republicans have been essentially in Arizona, running on goodwill, Tim, is what I'm saying, I guess.
Right.
Running on goodwill from the voters. And it's a classic case of kind of taking people for granted, and I'm not saying the new leadership is doing that. I'm saying that's been the case for years. And if I, my advice would be to rebrand that puppy and rebrand and reach out. Don't let people talk you into spending money on postcards and other garbage, like that. We're out of the era of mailer contacts. You have to have conversations with people. You're not reading to people, not talking to people. There's a difference. You have to talk with people. You have to have conversations with them. And you cannot redo who you are in your image by using the old playbook. It's just not good enough anymore. It's not. And you have to get in neighborhoods that have made Republicans uncomfortable in the past. I have a Republican friend who's straight up from the ghetto. I grew up myself in some, not an upper class white neighborhood. All right. These are the people that Republicans have traditionally felt uncomfortable working with, that they're going to have to get comfortable because they're the ones in, like I said, one of them he's a straight up guy from the ghetto, and he is GOP all the way. All right. That's somebody that the GOP would never reach out to and say, give us a hand making inroads with your community. And it's time they start thinking out of the box. And right after 2016, there's this funny little effect that goes on. We talk about the issues that Republicans are having now in the suburbs, right? Even in certain more affluent suburbs. It's really just true that they're having issues in metro suburbs. Look, for instance, at the North Carolina special election, Tim. If it were true that Republicans were having a problem in just straight up burbs, then we would have saw my soon-to-be home district move to the Democrats as well in North Carolina. There were 2 special elections that day, but we only focused on the one, which had an exceptionally strong Democratic candidate and a little bit different. But in my soon-to-be new district, which includes areas of New Bern, that also includes areas like Morehead City, very affluent, very high income, very wealthy. And yet it was R plus 30 when Donald Trump ran. It was R plus 30 when we had that election. We just only focused on the other one. And my point is that after 2016, I made the argument that Republicans could do real damage at that moment to the Democratic Party long term if they would have made a more concerted effort and the economy was roaring. So if they would have laid the groundwork for, I'm talking about unprecedented voter outreach. You cannot undo decades of relationships with voters because the economy is doing well. It's great to be able to say the economy is doing well. And by the way, there's all-time low African-American unemployment, all-time low Hispanic employment. But what Republicans do is kind of rely on Fox News to tell people that. There's nobody in their neighborhood telling them that. Like my buddy, there's nobody there being supported by the Republican Party. If you go and you look at how Democrats do this, they're masters. Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama. I'll tell you what, Tim, I saw Mitt Romney's over there spending millions of dollars on an app that didn't even work while Barack Obama's making hot dogs with people in their backyard. That is what their campaign did. It was beautiful, and in the end, people are about relationships. We crave relationships. We crave attention from each other. We want to know our fellow man and woman cares about us, and that applies to politics as well. And when you're not in front of people in their life, in their neighborhood, in their church, look at what's going on right now with black pastors and black reverends being arrested because white Democratic governors have imposed draconian restrictions on their First Amendment right. Where was the Republican outreach to say, we told you, you belong with us. Your home is with us. These are not people of faith. They don't believe in what you believe in. Yes, they help you through the government, the government programs, venues. That's all you have from them to rely on. We will help you too. Where has that been? Nowhere. There are outreach programs. That's not what I'm talking. I am not talking about training 600 volunteers to use an app. I'm talking about on the ground, go shake hands. Go in neighborhoods that you're uncomfortable being in. Guess what? That's the only way, because they're in there. They're not scared to walk down Martin Luther King Boulevard. Only you are. And if you're too scared, then get people like my friend Jim to do it. He would love to, but he's got to work. The man has a job.
he's got to be supported by the infrastructure of the party. I mean, it's just, this is some of the stuff that it's not, and then I go on Twitter, Tim, and I see, oh, look at the Emerson poll. His approval's at 30% among African Americans. I'll pull it up right now. We were the first one. I got 10 minutes. I will. I mean, since I basically did you guys so dirty anyway. Wasn't my fault. Just popped out. But let me pull this up. We were one of the first ones to catch the bump that Donald Trump was getting among African American voters. One of the very first ones. And everybody was talking about, that was back then, Tim, when they had like Kanye West coming to the White House, and people were like, oh yeah, well, he's got Kanye West coming, right? I can actually, instead of pulling up the actual, let me see if we link to the spreadsheet here. Instead of pulling up the, what's it called itself? I got to remove the one from the screen. Instead of pulling up the article about the poll, let me see if I could just grab that spreadsheet, okay, and see if we can grab this, because we actually polled, I think it was Mother's Day, Rasmussen had him at 15%. Some other people had him rising up, YouGov, and we had already polled it and realized that we had him very high. And when I thought we were done, and we had a sufficient sample size, but I, as being skeptical as I am, I decided, you know what, we need to poll this some more. It was in May of 2018, and we decided that we needed to, right, because this is August. It was May of that year, and we had him in the 20s, and we polled, there it is right there. We polled May 11th through the 12th, and then the 14th. And I thought maybe that there was some statistical noise there, Tim, because of the holiday. And I was thinking maybe that's what it is. But in the end, we kept going another day, and there was no change at all from where we were from where we were the preceding 3 days in the field. So let me see if I can find this crossed out.
So do you think that support's still there?
I think it's going to fall. It's going to fall because I think the economy was doing it. That was the point of the article that I wrote. And here, I'll pull it up right here for people to see, because I really didn't want to show them the article. I wanted to show them the spreadsheet, but I'm having a different time locating it right now. So the first one is, the Trump bump among black voters is real, very real. And then I wrote a second one, which was more evidence the Trump bump among black voters is real. And where I was going with this is that I was kind of nervous that there was statistical noise from the holiday, went back in there. And in the end, it wasn't because Kanye West was there, though I'm sure that can't help. It was about, it can't, right. Yes. Couldn't hurt. And it wasn't hurting. But in the end, this was about the economy. And if you were to go into the poll and you look, you would see that the economy, he got very high marks. Here it is right here. So do you approve of the way Donald Trump is handling the U.S. economy? 58% approve, 42% disapprove. Okay. And then employment and jobs, 55 approve, 44 disapprove. So it really was just that he was scoring high marks among the economy than he was. Oh, here we go. And people ask me about this, the APOR Transparency Initiative checklist. Ironically, because we've always...
so this was even before some of the prison reform measures, and some of the second chance measures where there's been some people released.
That's right. Exactly right. And
so, I mean, if he gets mid-teens from the African-American vote, if he gets 15%, just to throw a number out there, I know he got 8% last time, he's probably not going to get into the 20s, because approval and will you vote for are two different questions.
Totally different. My point.
If he gets just 15%, just to throw it out there, which I mean, I don't think that's unrealistic, it's game over in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, well,
it's game over in Michigan.
Remember when we were talking about how close George W. Bush was to winning
Yeah.
that state? That is why he got about 18% of the black vote in that
No,
state,
no,
or 16 maybe, something, but it
in
was
that
close.
state. Oh, in that state.
In that
Okay.
state, yes.
Yeah.
And then in Ohio as well, he did pretty well in Ohio. But he didn't get that working class vote in those counties where Tim and I were really stressing yesterday. Erie, again, Barack Obama by 16 points, went for Donald Trump by 2. That's on the back of white working class. End of story. But then you can keep that margin down in places like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And while the urban vote is typically going to come in the way it's going to come in, that in the end, it really is about, getting those more affluent voters that are feeling the economy, the effects of the economy, because there are going to be some, like Tim said, and it's going to be disproportionate in urban areas where they'll say, I guess he's doing an all right job. And we'll look at the difference between somewhat approve. Let me see if I can. It's not letting me do it because I'm on here. But this is the strongly approved. This is somewhat approved. That's his overall job performance. Where, let's find race by race. Look at that, Tim. 12.2% strongly, 14.4 somewhat. Okay.
Strongly is almost I'll vote for him.
That's right. And that's why when we go into
14
the economy,
is maybe half of those people vote for him.
may or less, but still. That's why
Still.
I said he can shoot for 13%
So
if the economy gets back up and
wants
running.
to shoot for 15 or 18, Rich, it's game over in Wisconsin and in Michigan and Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that would keep his
I
win.
mean, I know you don't want to let them drive up weaknesses in some of the suburban areas, but that's just a game. That's a game changer.
If he were to hold roughly his vote in the suburbs, and then if he did do a dent in a place like that, like Wayne, that's why I said before you could shoot for 13, Tim, because at his high mark here with us anyway, at his high mark, strongly was close to 13%. And then when you got into some of these issues, like if you specifically just asked him about the economy, that was his overall right here. This is his overall job approval.
Right.
And
hey, Rich, I see somebody mentioning it in the chat that they're protesting in Michigan, and Fox Business just had a clip of one of their people walking between the lines of cars that were in whatever part of Lansing that they were in. And I will tell you this, it's snowing in Lansing,
and they're
Michigan
outside.
right now.
And
it's April. It's the middle of April. It's snowing.
Alex
and it looked like it was wet and a miserable day.
Alex Berenson said last week, Tim, if this continues for another week and these numbers keep going down like this, that in the end, people are going to start taking to the streets.
Yeah, but you're talking about extreme draconian measures that the Michigan governor has put on, where you can't buy gardening supplies, you can't buy seeds to grow your own fruits and vegetables in your garden. A lot of people do that out there.
And in Raleigh,
I don't know
North
if you want to go there just for in the last 2 minutes or not, but
yeah, I mean, in that, she's auditioning to be the vice president for Joe Biden, because everybody knows whoever Joe Biden picks for vice president will be the president in 6 to 18 months, according to some Democrats I spoke with, if Joe Biden wins. So she's out there trying to be, little Miss Tyrant.
She was on the Today Show this morning.
And Raleigh, by the way, too, Tim, there were protests in Raleigh yesterday, and Raleigh's not that far behind. But guess what? A lot of them were African-American. Goes to what I was saying before.
Yes.
They're not, you cannot keep Baptist African-Americans out of their church. You can't do it. And I don't know where the Republican Party is right now to say, we told you your home is really home with us, is really here with us. Like Donald Trump said, what the hell do you have to lose? These people are, are giving you these, they're trying to take your faith away. What give us a chance and then at least plant the seeds there. And I do just want to real quick before I get off of this spreadsheet, Tim, when you got into the actual issues themselves, you can see the damage between, Donald Trump being a polarizing figure, some people just don't like him, and then some are duped by the media that he's a racist. So when you ask, it's true, we've polled it. So when you ask specifically just about him, his overall performance, you'll get a better indication of how people view him. But if you get into how he's dealing on some of these issues, it was through the roof, Tim. I mean, a quarter of African Americans strongly approved in this poll of the job he was doing on the economy at the time. That's huge. I mean, that is so big. But yeah, while we got a minute left, I mean, I'm not surprised to see protests popping up in Michigan. Like I said, there were Raleigh yesterday. I think the longer this goes on, I agree with Alex, the longer this goes on, the more it's going to go. I mean, and you have parents who have their children home and they're trying to do the best that they can with their kids, missing out on school, but they got to work if they're lucky enough to still have a job. It's just a mess out there. It's a mess. And to expect Americans to continue to go on like this is just crazy. Yep, same with Governor Northam. I saw the other one, and another draconian and very draconian policy, and they jumped the gun on a lot of this stuff. We are nowhere near the numbers they said we were going to have, yet they have made decisions that will last now. Ralph Northam, by the way, just happened to kill the Republican primary, right? I mean, politics had nothing to do with that decision. But go ahead, Tim. You want to say something before I give our little exit?
I'm good. I mean, markets are pretty much where they were the last time we spoke. The NASDAQ is outperforming. It's down 2%. The Dow and the S&P are down 2.75%.
Right.
So look, even if we closed right here, it's a down day. The market had a big run. The NASDAQ gives up half of the gains it had yesterday. Bad economic data, bad earnings. We're going to see more of that. I think investors get it. I'll take it. I mean, this isn't, we're not down 5.5%, threatening to maybe hit the down 7% circuit breaker. We're down a little over 2.5%.
Not bad. Right. We're not crashing.
We're up 25% in 3 weeks. I'll take it.
I just want to say I got bumped and we didn't do that segment on the checks. So I am going to just extend this for a few minutes here. Okay. Just a minute or two. It won't take me long. If you go to People's Pundit Daily, you will get a very detailed breakdown about this. We got an actual calculator, a little test link there. Those of you who get SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, and those who get Social Security Insurance, if you do not make enough to file a tax return, they have a rule change now. While there are exceptions, which is why I'm saying to go to that article if you really want to know for sure. Go to the article on People's Pundit Daily. It's in the market and economy section. Or if you don't see it, search for it. Just search for stimulus checks and it will pop up. Okay. Now that it's April 15th, the first round, which is about 50 million, is over. And now people who had if you had your direct deposit information with the Social Security Administration, okay, if they have that, the IRS rule change from April 1st says that they will simply get it from the Social Security Administration, but that's why you could be up to 2 weeks from this point today. It could be tomorrow, but it could be 2 weeks from today that you will see your check pending. That is if they have your information, if Social Security has it. If they don't have it, chances are you need to file that short tax return. Okay. But again, that's why there's a load of information in that. And there's a lot of different scenarios for different people. So I really, if you want to be certain, go to that article on PPD. Let me pull it up actually, Tim. I'll show people at least what it looks like. I can't read it all because there's so much information, but I'll at least be able to show them what it looks like. Go to PPD and here it is right here. What you need to know about coronavirus stimulus checks. And before I clicked on it like an idiot, but let me show people what it looks like on the homepage of PPD. Okay. All right, here it is, folks, right here. Okay. What you need to know about coronavirus stimulus checks. Go down a little bit when you click on it. God, this new server's blazing. We've always had dedicated servers, but we got a brand spanking new one. It's super fast. I'm in love with it. who is eligible to receive stimulus checks? That's number one. But then how much will you get? Do you need to take action? Is for those of you folks who are asking this question. No additional action is needed for recipients of Social Security, to include Social Security disability insurance and railroad retirement, Tim's favorite word, who are not typically required to file a tax return. But if you want to be sure, there are other eligible low-income workers and certain veterans with disabilities. If you want to be sure, click on Do I Need to File a Tax Return? That will take you to an IRS tool, and that will give you a few questions, and it will help you determine whether or not you need to file a tax return, okay? But for the most part, most people who have their information with the Social Security Administration, you won't need to file, all right? But go there, check it out, all right? So, because I don't want to be responsible for something that may be glitched, but the information that's in that article is vast, it's accurate. I see a lot of people got theirs today. Yeah, today is if you're a filer, then you got yours today. If you were a single guy who's a worker and has filed for the last 2 years, 18 and 19, but you have no kids, you're not filing, you're filing, single because you're a single person, then you would have gotten yours much quicker. We actually spoke to somebody who got theirs last week, all right, and was able to confirm it. We saw it in his bank. So if you are married, filing jointly, have kids, maybe you have business income in that, then you're going to get it today, or chances are you got it today. And then everybody else who the government, you have shared your banking information with the government, you're going to begin to get it as of tomorrow. It could be 2 weeks from now, up to 2 weeks from now. If they don't have it, then you need to file that, share the information with them. You can actually still get a paper check if you'd like. And then the IRS, after the payment is made within a certain time, Tim, I think it's a week or 2 weeks, the IRS never calls you, never will ever call you. All right. If I'll call you on the phone, it's a scam. Be careful of scams. I got to say this again. Be careful of scams. But the IRS will send a letter to everybody they sent a payment to. It will alert you to a few things. When did they send that payment? In what form did it take? If it went to a bank account, which bank did it go to? If it went as a paper check, which address did it go to? All of that. So, but the IRS will never call you, folks. They will never pick up the phone and call you. So if they do, that's a scam. Don't answer it. All right. So we're about 10 minutes over here. I know we had some difficulties today, folks, and most of you stuck with us. So I got to thank you for that. So as usual, we'll be back 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. We'll have another great show without hopefully any interruptions. And you were watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barish. You could follow me on Twitter at Peoples_Pundit. And I'm joined my wingman who handled it today during the blackout, Tim the Source Anderson at TJ Anderson1. Follow Tim at TJ Anderson1 on Twitter. Okay, folks. And if you are watching on Periscope, I see you guys giving us those likes. That's great. And the follows, don't forget to follow us or whatever account you're following on. It runs on mine. It runs on PPD's. Like them both, follow them both, however it goes. If you're on Facebook, don't forget to like People's Pundit Daily's page and give us some likes on the post itself. If you're a YouTube watcher, which I see that's starting to build up. If you're a YouTube watcher, make sure you subscribe to the page and give us those thumbs up. All of those metrics works. We're almost to a milestone we're trying to hit. So, like the page. And if you want to be notified when the show goes live, hit that bell and that'll tell you when. We tried to give everybody a couple of minutes today. I think we're going to do that as the norm from now on. We'll go live a couple of minutes before 10. This way you get that notification. But Tim and I will not be on until 10. So just hang tight. If you see it's still that little looping thing at the bottom of the screen right here, that thing moving around. If you see the headline ticker go, we're coming. So hang tight. All right. And then the ultimate way to watch to support the show is to subscribe to PPD, which is ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. Again, everybody, thanks for watching today, and we will see you back on Thursday, April 16th